Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Hi.
Wow. We're so grateful we have this session to really address your questions and your prayers. And even if you have things that come up during the session, feel free to, put your digital hand up. We love that.
Yeah, we just thought, this is a precious opportunity to just have interaction and have one-on-one talk in front of the whole group, which will be just so beneficial to everybody. And we have received a lot of your questions, and somehow in the talks and the movies, a lot of them, we touched on, but we were just saying today, this window of opportunity can be given just to more live interactions. So if you have something that is on your mind, on your heart, that you want to just talk directly, then feel free to put your digital hands up.
Yeah, when you raise your hand and you bring up your current situation or the current issues you're dealing with, that is actually so relevant for you. It's relevant for us, and it's actually a blessing. I think we have maybe about 250 or 260 people watching, and when you ask a question from your heart, because it really is something that's very important to you, then that sends out a blessing both in the question and the answer. So it's just very, very beneficial. And I know some of you, we have about 53 new people, but it can be a little daunting at first, or there could be some hesitancy, but actually when you speak up what's on your heart, that is the way that the Spirit uses these gatherings to bring inspiration and answers to many people that you haven't even met. And people that aren't even online with us right now are all blessed by your authenticity and your transparency. And we had a couple questions. One was a metaphysical question, and then there was a question our friend David Smickley asked again about decision-making and how we make decisions in terms of daily decisions, and I think, David, you said you had watched and seen a video of mine where I talked about joining with other members of the community, and you were quite fascinated by that, asking, can you talk about that a little more? And I think the way that it works is out of the power of prayer, out of humbleness, out of just showing up and every day being open to let the day be given in a very involuntary way, and it flows most beautifully when there is that respect and humbleness, and there's not that sense of ego autonomy that makes decision making difficult. Whenever the ego is involved in decision making, then it's basically the past preferences are huge. And that's what you hear about mostly, even with couples and families, okay, we'll do it your way this time, but the next time we do it my way. It's like a trade-off. You win this time, I win the next time. And that actually is not the way that the Holy Spirit is guiding us to make decisions.
Yeah. It's like today is day 3. If you look at the workbook lesson, I do not understand what this means. Like, you go around the room and you basically, wherever your eyes land on, you say, I do not understand. And I think with decision making, it's very practical way to go about life and yet transfer that lesson. We always go into our lives thinking we already know something about it. We know what our best interests are. We know the goal that we want to achieve. So it becomes almost an autopilot. So when we get into prayer, especially you brought up to pray with other people, that serves as a context for us to actually come back to say, okay, if I don't know any of it, maybe I come back to ask to what do you want us to do? What do you want us to act on in this very moment? So it is truly a relinquish process and inner listening together. So
yeah. And in the Rules for Decision section in A Course in Miracles in the text, Jesus says, decisions are continuous, but you are not always aware of when you're making them. And it fits with the first question that you wrote into us about these hidden warriors, these unconscious beliefs, where it's basically a decision that's been pushed out of awareness. So, as an example, for example, when you have somebody that maybe is a child and then their parents divorce and they decide something, even seemingly as a child, like, oh, I caused my parents' divorce. And then they carry the guilt of this decision, which becomes a belief, becomes an unconscious belief that I caused my parents' divorce. And then that influences all their friendships, all their relationships, even when they're adults, until they actually are able to start to get down and question that. Is it true? As Byron Katie says, is it true? Are you sure that it's true? And so that I would say that one of the main conditions that's helpful is we do really encourage expression sessions. Even Quantico, the house we're in right now, there's a group of people. How many people are living here? 8 people live in this house. And they have to flow and function together, and occasionally you'll have like a morning meeting, and what's on your mind? Is there something that's stirring? I remember Kirsten one time was told, don't make any kind of major decisions unless you're peaceful. Be in a peaceful state of mind to let the decision come through and be given. And on a day-to-day basis, a lot of people can say, well, that's a challenge on a day-to-day basis because at times they don't experience peace, and yet there seem to be practical decisions to be made every day. So I know that some of you have asked for more holy relationship panels and things, but it's quite a good topic about how you come together and pray together and receive the guidance. And if you're completely, genuinely attuned to one another, then you will receive the answer, the same answer. And if you're really completely, genuinely attuned to each other, you'll receive the same answer at the same time. That just shows you that there's one Holy Spirit guiding the whole thing. But that takes a lot of mind training to be that attuned to the Spirit. And that was one of the reasons why we were guided to set up co-living this past year. What was it, around April of last year, where we were setting up centers. We started off down here in Mexico, but basically where people would come and stay basically for a minimum of 1 month, and then there would be the availability of expression sessions, and people could converse with each other, they could pray, they could partake in different activities that they felt to participate in. We do a lot of things now online, so people had the option to participate in those or not. Some even felt that they wanted to work, and they worked online, so we had some people doing that. But that was part of our guidance to set up a situation where you could come together with other brothers and sisters who are also wanting to learn how to pray and be inner directed. And So there wasn't a lot of structure and parameters placed on this kind of situation. And it's gone quite well. I think we've been amazed. Some of you might have seen the series of interviews that came from our co-living in the casa, and it was quite amazing.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I was talking with the group in co-living, and what I heard was how miraculous the healing was orchestrated by the Spirit and the group of people coming together with the same purpose. Somehow there is a divine orchestration just in that unified intention, and also it was so joyful. I remember, it's so joyful from outside. It looks like a party house. And then when they were called a party house, they really didn't like it. They said, we are not a party house because we're so purposeful. There's so much healing, even though it looks like party house, but deep down it was just so much healing and so much purpose and synchronicity and miracles. So that is truly the Spirit's way of healing for all of us. Not a single person is aware of how to facilitate healing, and yet when we all come together to join somehow with the same intention and same honesty, the Spirit really orchestrates everything for every single individual. Yeah.
In this world of time and space, that's basically just the projection of, I'll say, ego autonomy. What do I mean by ego autonomy? Well, the whole belief in the ego is the belief that you can have a life and a will apart from God. So everyone who seems to come to this world is looking for an adventure of ego autonomy. It's almost like a time-space adventure. What was that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger where he goes, Total Recall? He didn't like his life on Earth, so he wanted to go to Mars. And he wanted an exciting, adventurous life on Mars, if you remember the first Total Recall movie. And it was very shocking for him, everything that happened. And he wasn't aware that there were all these memory implants. And that's what the ego does with this world. It's full of past memory implants, and so human beings think they have a life of their own, a time between birth and death where they can choose to do whatever they want, a great adventure, the great time-to-space adventure, except the ego has rigged the whole thing. The whole thing is based on past memories that actually never happened. So it's a world of imagination, and for most people, it's not really a happy dream when they come here. It's actually a nightmare. Some report different childhoods. Some will say, well, my childhood wasn't so bad. And others say, well, mine was a total nightmare. And then even the ones that got through childhood say, oh, you don't even want to know what my teen years were like, and how many marriages I had, and all the things that I went through. The nightmare didn't seem to start until they got to be young adults, and then it got really bad. But this world was not set up by God. This is all about ego autonomy, and yet, if we surrender that ego autonomy over, and we let all of our skills and abilities, which were developed in an ego framework, we give them all to the Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit unifies our mind and shows us another way of looking at the world without judgment. And it's a very happy dream. It's so sparkly because you have so many witnesses of love that show up. When you don't judge the world, then the world doesn't seem to judge you. I always say, whatever you want from the world will want from you. If you have needs and demands that you make of this world, it's just a mirror, and then the characters will seem to want and demand and need things from you as a person, because those thoughts are still thoughts in your mind. So we're looking at a way of letting everyone come together and live in harmony, and that may sound like a pie-in-the-sky idea, but I will assure you, if you talk to our people in our community, if you talk to people here in this house, Quantico, it's quite a beautiful experience. Imagine waking up in the morning, when you open your eyes in the morning, and you're actually wanting to have encounters with your mighty mates, as they say in Australia. You're looking forward to the day for encounters with your mighty companions. You can't wait to have these encounters. How different this is from the human perspective guided by the ego, where people oftentimes dread going to work, dread talking to their spouse, dread even their pets. They sometimes feel their pets are too demanding. They dread going out into the world because of past associations in the mind that have not been joyful. But imagine if you have a shift in your mind to a new purpose, and you cannot wait to meet your mighty companions as you go through the day. You cannot wait for all the collaboration opportunities that you're going to get. Even the movie we showed last night, Ken and I, wow, that by the middle of that movie, they started to get into collaboration of a project of redoing a house that overlooks the Pacific Ocean. And by the end, the neighbor had hired a crew of 20 to join with them, and you had 25, 27 people buzzing around, hammers going, saws going, drills going. It was like a ballet dance. It was like a symphony where everybody was playing on key and everybody was harmonizing. And they all wanted to get the house done. And then at the end, they put all the Christmas lights on it, and it was sparkling. And then not only did they achieve their project goal, but the son, Sam, went through a major healing and decided to give the house away to this girl who had been injured by his grandfather, by George's father, in an automobile accident. So fulfill yourself completely through the project and then give it away. And that's pretty much what we're doing. We have all kinds of collaborative projects that we do. They're very inspiring, they're very joyful, they're very exciting, and then we go online and we give it away. This is our gift to you. We're giving our inspiration from the way we're living. We're just extending the attitude, we're extending the blessing so that everyone can have a direct experience of that blessing.
Yeah, and also it's like it ties into what I've been feeling like, really everything that we're doing is for a present goal of joy. It is not for a future outcome, because I have to say, sometimes we say we desire happiness, but really I had to come to this point to realize I don't really know what joy is and what happiness is. And really the reason that I'm getting into anything is to learn that, to learn what joy is, to learn what Spirit's joy is, and that is inspired by the Spirit. So the Spirit actually orchestrates the project as a backdrop, but also the people. And that's a real insight that I gained over the years. People actually come together, seemingly do a project, but really we're learning what joy is. And that is a present goal. We're not really doing something to become better. And I think Josie from Netherlands asked that question about being trained as a clown and wanted to get into comedy all her life. At 57 years old, just so, in the ego standard, it's so late to get into an industry and become good at anything. And yet, if we're here to learn joy and to learn how to give that away while at the same time learning it, then that goal really shifts. And it becomes the end result of becoming good in a standard or any standard become really irrelevant to us. So we're more free to just throw ourselves into any given project, knowing, the purpose of doing it is just for this present joy, to have it, receive it, give it away, and then we allow the form to shift as guided, but the purpose stays the same. That's why it is really, really joyful, because we actually are learning joy for the first time. That was what my experience is. I have a very joyful life because I started to learn what true joy is as I go along with the Spirit. And somehow, because our brothers and us are the same, in essence, so the Spirit really gonna bring collaboration into our lives, and that is where we start to really become happy, when we meet our brothers and have no barrier between us and just learn through everything that we can really be together truly, see each other truly. That's just very, very joyful.
Yeah, it is joyful. It's like when you light a firecracker and the firecracker goes up and explodes in the sky. You enjoy the light, you enjoy the color, but you're not left with anything. You can't, there's nothing left behind. It's all gone up in smoke and lights,
yeah.
And you're left with nothing. And that's the way actually the spiritual journey goes. It's not like you can build a spiritual resume, because the Spirit is deleting all the words on the resume and you're left with a blank piece of paper at the end. It's not like you have a spiritual achievement where, you get an Oscar or a Grammy or some kind of gold statue for self-realization or spiritual enlightenment. You don't get a statue. You get nothing. You're left with nothing, no thing. And just happy. You're just happy. You're happy in the moment, and that's all there is. It's kind of funny too that it's called A Course in Miracles, because a course seems to involve study and repetition and learning, and then at the end you take an exam and you have to pass the course. But that's with a worldly course. This course it seems to be about learning, but it's actually about unlearning. It seems to be that you're required to do things like 365 lessons and study, when actually it's about undoing. And you seem to get a certificate or something when you pass a course in the world, but you don't get a certificate from Jesus. All you get is present happiness. That's all it is. There's nothing tangible. I have people who had said, I want to go on the spiritual journey, but what will be the tangible rewards? And I say, all the benefits are purely spiritual. And they would say, what's that mean? That doesn't sound really good. I say, yeah, it means there's no material benefits from this experience. It's totally an I am presence that you get, that you've always had and you always are and always will be. And that's what you're left with, is who I am, which is a perfect child of God. I am as God created me. That's what you're left with. So it's beautiful in that some months ago, Francis took some time in one of the online retreats to share with everybody that the biggest problem that spiritual aspirants or Course in Miracles students have is that they believe that they have to understand first and then they practice. And Francis did a whole talk on, no, you practice first and then you understand. This is not like an earth course where you have to understand how to ride a bike and then practice riding a bike. No. Understand how to cook a baked potato and then practice cooking a baked potato. Do you think you're actually going to understand enlightenment and then practice something after it? You think you're going to understand the miracle and then practice the miracle? It just doesn't work that way. It's called A Course in Miracles, but this is unlike any course you'll ever take in your life. You shouldn't even think of it as a course. Francis and I both had many, many years, over 10 years each in university study, and the only thing about that is what we're coming to tell you is there is no such thing as intellectual understanding. That's an oxymoron. That's a contradiction in terms. Now, I've traveled the world for a couple, 2.5 decades, and I've been to 44 countries, and oftentimes I sit down with people and their question is, David, I get this intellectually, but, I get this intellectually, but, what does that even mean? But, but is a contradiction word. I get it, you must not get it, and even intellectually, if you got a but, comma, but at the end of it. Or, intellectually I grasp the Course, but, yeah, well, but what? You know, that but is getting you nowhere. You're going nowhere with that. So, when we get questions, we do have a metaphysical question here today too, but the metaphysical questions, I would say, first of all, the ego is the questioning aspect of the mind. So the Christ doesn't have any questions, the Spirit doesn't have any questions, and when you start to question what you believe, then that's a helpful question. But if you start questioning God or God's motives, I'll tell you one thing, you are barking up the wrong tree, because God is pure love and light, and God doesn't have like human motives. There is no anthropomorphic God. There is no anthropomorphic love. God is not an intellectual concept, like I shared the other night with the movie. Whether you're an atheist and you believe that God doesn't exist, or whether you believe in a punishing, angry God, either one of those concepts are just more concepts to pluck out of your mind, to release, because they're just blocking the way to light. But maybe we can read, we have a metaphysical question in here.
I think that's from Wendy, I think.
Wendy Beffert from New Jersey, a new participant. Wendy,
Maybe I can
you can read that off there. It's the magical page 5.
Right. Oh, that's right. So, Wendy's question. Hello, David and companions. So I just read the first question. If the correction happened at the same time as, or even immediately after the perceived separation, why did God allow His Son to experience a split mind and perceive the ego thought form and subsequent hell of an illusory physical world, effectively trapping or concealing His true nature within this illusion, Maya? If God loves the sonship so much, why would He or she allow for the pain of this perceived separation and illusion? Ken Wapnick stated in his book that God gave us free will. With all due respect to Ken, I view the answer of free will as inconsistent with the Course, because it says that we have no mind and no thoughts apart from God. If this is true, then free will is impossible and cannot exist. The very notion of free will implies a belief in a separate self apart from God and in the reality of the world of form, thereby still begging the question of why would God allow His Son's perfect mind to split or seem to split in the first place?
Okay, well, thank you, Wendy, for your question. It seems to have a couple aspects. One is the question about free will, and then the second aspect is why did God allow it? Why did God allow the separation? Why did God allow the split mind? And it goes back to what I was sharing on Saturday, that when you are told that creation is spirit, is eternity, is this eternal love that has no opposite, then this world, which is the belief in opposites, generates all kinds of questions. And the very first question that was ever asked, because in heaven there aren't any questions, but the first question that even seemed to arise was, what am I? You can see it's an identity confusion. It's an identity question. Christ doesn't ever ask, what am I? God doesn't ask, what am I? Light is just what is. And that's why Jesus says in the workbook, we say God is, and we cease to speak. Because that isness, that eternal love and light is everything. So the very question of why would God allow it presumes that God did allow it. And God doesn't understand anything other than the love and joy and light that is reality. Separation is not understandable at all. Actually, it will never be, you will never say, intellectually I understand the split mind, or intellectually I understand the separation from God. Because that's not light, and light is wisdom and understanding, and you don't really understand until you wake up from the dream. So this whole pursuit of trying to understand, like read a book to understand, which is often what we have done as humans. We try to read the book and even practice the lessons that we may understand, but Jesus says, no, God will take the final step, and that final step is more just a remembrance of God, a remembrance of heaven. It's not actually, God doesn't even take steps, but that's putting it in terms that could have some meaning to a mind that is asleep and dreaming. Why does God allow a split mind? God doesn't. That's the beauty. If you ask the question from an inverted, upside-down thought system of fear, it seems to be a meaningful question. In fact, I always, from my travels all over the world and many times around the world, I used to call that the number one asked question that I received in all these 44 different countries. How did the separation happen in the first place? I call that the number one question. And Jesus tells us in the Manual for Teachers, in the clarification of terms, that the ego will ask many questions that this course has no answer for. How did the impossible happen? To whom did the impossible happen? And many variations of this number one question. A better question would be, what am I believing that I would perceive a fragmented world? What am I feeling that I would hold on to the idea that love and fear can both coexist? What is it internally that I still am holding on to that is showing me an impossible situation, an impossible world, that is keeping me from knowing my divine creator, my true self? So God doesn't allow separation. In fact, only from an upside-down mind could the question even arise. And of course, as you start to have these awakening experiences, you realize that projecting that question onto God, like, how could God allow a split mind? That's a prime example of how the ego projects onto God and onto the world in terms of stating that it exists. That question, why did God allow the separation or allow the split mind, is a statement, and it is not a question at all. That question is covering over a statement that is that believing I am an ego. That's what it's covering. So it's just a misdirection. It's just something that's thrown out over the top as a disguise, as if it's a real question, but there is no answer to that question. It's kind of like if you ask me, what is the marital status of the number 5? And I told you, that is a ridiculous question. And you persisted and said, okay, all right, that is ridiculous, but please answer the question, David. What is the marital status of the number 5? You know, I can't give an answer to it because there is no answer. And with spiritual awakening, it's all in the experience that Jesus tells us that there is no answer to these questions, but there is an experience that will come that will end your doubting. And this is also what he told Helen Schuckman and Bill Thetford after they had received his dictation of a number of chapters of the Course. They did stop him and they say, could we just ask one tiny question? And they said, Jesus, how did this happen in the first place? And Jesus said, well, he addressed it at the level of emotions. He said, you can tell by your emotional roller coaster ride as a human being that you believe that the separation happened. You can tell by your varied emotions that you believe that it happened. But a belief is not an actuality. As I said yesterday, there are no beliefs in heaven. Heaven simply is pure love and light, eternal love. And the belief in something beyond heaven is what the ego is. The ego is simply the belief that there could be more. Perhaps there could be more than everything. That's a way of describing the ego. Perhaps there's just by chance could be more than heaven. So that's why Buddha said empty your mind. That's why all the great saints and mystics, that's why Jesus says empty your mind, is because he's saying you can't come to that experience of who you really are while you're holding on to beliefs and concepts that God didn't create. And the only belief in the mind that is helpful out of all the beliefs that seem to be in the sleeping mind, the only helpful belief is forgiveness, because it's the one belief that takes you out of illusions. Every other belief keeps you in the perpetual belief of the ego of linear time, and only forgiveness releases you from time. So that's why atonement is the final lesson, accepting the atonement, because it's seeing for once and for all, I do not know the thing I am. I do not know what I'm doing, where I'm going, or how to look upon the world. And in this empty, open mind, then salvation comes. The light comes to light up the mind that has relinquished the belief that it can search for something meaningful in form. And actually this relates to a lot of the questions, because the question you mentioned with Jose about what about, is it possible for me to be a clown and have that profession at age 57? Many of you are asking those questions. Marlene was bringing up the mom question from Holland. Like I'm a mom, how do I apply this? You know, all these different questions basically go back to what I was sharing on Saturday, that in heaven our function is creating, and in regard to time and space, the only function we have is forgiveness. It makes it very simple. Now, you may have clown skills that may get used as part of your expression. You may have mom skills that might get used as part of the expression, you know, especially if you've made up a world that looks like you have a child, or it looks like you have some training. Sounds like Jose has some clown training already under her belt. It's not something new. Those skills can be used by the Spirit, but still the purpose of using those skills is to see the false as false, and it's to forgive. It's not to make something of yourself. And a lot of times that's the question is, how do I become something? How do I follow my dreams in this world to achieve my dreams in the world? And what Francis and I are just sharing with you today is that really that's backwards. It hasn't gone that way for either of us.
No, it's very frightening actually to think like that. To think that I need to become something, it doesn't matter what, even a good spiritual course student. Anytime we think along those lines, it's very, very frightening. There's a standard to meet, there is a pressure, and there's a comparison that's going to haunt you at every turn, comparison. And I remember one example that you talked about when you were traveling was when you were visiting someone, and I can't remember the details, but it was about the dishes. You asked the host, do you want me to wash the dishes after the meal? And the host said, only if it brings you joy. And that's such a beautiful answer to absolutely everything. Like, should I do this? Only if that brings you joy. Only if that feels inspired in this moment, then jump in, And that turns all the doing and the how and what question into this present answer.
Yeah. And I think as we accept the belief that we have to do things that we don't like to do, that we have to take on tasks and jobs and activities that we don't really like, that ultimately will leave us with what Isabel was talking about, the anger. We do feel resentment, and we feel angry, and we project that onto the world. So we look at the world and we say, I'm fed up with this world. I have had it up to here. I cannot take another second of this world. And it's in the mind, but then it gets projected. The ego's like, oh, blame something. Blame the world, blame something of the world. Ease your mind a little bit by blaming something outside of yourself. And Jesus is inside saying, no, it's actually everything. The world's in your mind. And who you truly are underneath that world is the light. And that's in your mind too. So I remember even when I was in university, I was studying all these different courses and getting a degree and then another degree and working towards another degree. And there was a guidance counselor in there, and he said, oh, David, there's a book I want you to read, and it was called What Color is Your Parachute? That's a pretty common book that we read when we go to university. Even Francis, it's like, yeah. But basically, I saw that book as saying, what is it that's truly calling you? What is your joy? What is your happiness? What is your inspiration? And the ego will come in and say, well, yeah, okay, maybe there is some things that you find joyful, but you can't make a living at that. You can't make a living. That's what I had to face when I was in university, particularly towards the end of university, when I had been accepted into a doctorate program, and I was looking at all my options as I had done, and I remember taking all these exams, and I had a cat at the time that I named after Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi. So my cat Mo, during exam week, I went out. I was very frustrated and stressed during exam week, and I remember I went to the back patio and sat there to look up at the moon, and Mo joined me. And then when Mo and I were both looking at the moon, he did give me one of these ISO looks, like, are you crazy? Like, what are you so stressed about? We've got the moon. His eyes are real big, and he was so happy to be with me, and he was looking at me, who was in the middle of exam week, and he was giving me the look like, are you nuts? Have you lost all semblance of of beingness and got drifted off into the human artificial world. And basically, that's why I'm saying we do have to have faith that our joy and our inspiration is our livelihood. It is our way of being. And Francis and I both had to discover that we pursued so many different things and then finally came around to this involuntary nature of miracles, of just following guidance and feeling the joy of following the guidance. Not just hearing it, but actually following it. Doing what the guidance said, that brings the joy. If you just are aware of it, but you don't do it, then that means the ego is still resisting, that joy, that internal joy. Well, that's pretty good. I think we got through a couple of the major questions.
Yeah, and I saw so many hands there.
Yeah, we have 14 hands up. So why don't we jump right into the live interactions with you? We would love to hear from you.
Okay, David. Yes, we have many hands. And just a reminder to our English speakers to select English as your language so you can understand what everyone is saying. And if you can speak slowly for our translators and just keep to the heart of what you want to share. So I'm going to open it up for some of our newer participants. Paula, you can unmute.
Yes, thank you. I don't speak so well English, so just to thank you for this week. So great gift of joy and lightness. Thank you so much. And also the movies were perfect for me as mirrors. And I still wake up in the morning with dread to go towards the day, and I don't know. My prayer is to heal all the relationships that I have and that I don't have. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paula. Yeah, seeing your smiling face reminded me that second part of that question about do we have free will in this world? And we don't. We don't have free will in this world. God created us with free will in heaven. And so our will is God's will. So we share the same will with God for happiness, but when we seek for things in the world and believe in things of the world, really that's always an attempt to make a will apart from God. And I think, Paola, that's a little bit a part of when you wake up sometimes with the dread and you still feel there's relationships to heal. You're just slowly bringing your will into alignment with God's will, which is for perfect happiness. So the previous question was asking, she was saying, I don't think it's consistent to talk about God giving us free will. And if you look at this world, you could easily come to that conclusion because of the experiences of time and space. But actually, God's will for us is perfect happiness. God granted perfect happiness in the creation of Christ. Our eternal nature knows that our will is one with God's will, and yet this world of ego autonomy is an attempt to deny what was given forever, what was given as an eternal gift. So I think you're onto it when you realize that it does involve forgiveness of relationships, because whatever these relationships are still showing your mind is helping you see what it is that's still being held onto. And you're waking up every day with willingness to say, lead the way, Spirit, show me. I want to be happy. I want to wake up happy. And we're with you in that. We're totally with you, Paola. Oh, sweet.
Okay. Next we can go to Brenda. You can unmute.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
Yesterday, I believe it was in the commentary of the movie where David was talking about the dark shadows inside and bringing in Freud a little bit, and how because we're so unconscious of these dark shadows, we act unconsciously. And you said something, David, I believe it is from the Course, that deep down we hate God. And that just, I'd like you to talk a little bit more about what that means. I'm sure it has to do with ego and guilt, but I'm not quite grasping it.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. Well, Jesus tells us that the world was made in hatred because the ego made the cosmos of time and space, made the world. And the ego made it as a defense against awakening. The ego made it like as a mask. I sometimes talk about the cosmos as like in Adam and Eve, it says they were in the garden and suddenly they thought they were naked and they grabbed a fig leaf to cover their private parts. In heaven there aren't even private parts, but they grabbed a fig leaf to cover. There was some kind of embarrassment around the flesh, around the body, around body parts, and they put a fig leaf over it. I describe this world as like a cosmic fig leaf. It's a big mask. The whole cosmos is a mask, a cosmic fig leaf to cover over itself, to protect itself from the light. So there's a part in the workbook of A Course in Miracles where it says the world was made as an attack upon God, a place where God could enter not. Well, that's as descriptive as it gets. You won't even find that in Advaita Vedanta or the other many great spiritual traditions of the world. They don't quite state it as direct as that. That actually, for me, was helpful. It's one thing to think of the world as lila, as just a theater or as a play. It's another thing to be told it was made as an attack upon God, a place where God could enter not. That's coming from Jesus Christ. That's actually coming from a mind that has totally transcended the world, and he's like saying, well, let me give it to you straight, because I want you to know who you really are. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to mollycoddle you. I'm not going to dress it up and disguise it. I'll just give it to you straight. I like that. That's what I like about the Course, And that attack upon God is what the hatred is. That's the ego's hatred. Christ has no hatred at all, but the ego is the belief that there is no love and that there is no God. The ego is a death wish. And so death is another word that is used to talk about hatred. You could say guilt, death, fear, hatred are all synonyms to talk about this belief in separation. I remember I was in Edmonton, Canada, and I was giving a talk at a religious science church, and they said, "Oh, come, it's good. We'll hear your talk on Sunday, and we just are finishing up an 8-part study of the Buddha." And I thought, well, this is a real open-minded Christian church. They've got an 8-part study of the Buddha at a Christian church. I said, that sounds good to me. But as I began to do my talk on Sunday, after the first, 5 minutes of my talk, an elderly woman in the front seat, she started waving her hand and say, "Stop, stop, stop." And so I stopped and she said, "Listen, you've had nothing good to say about the ego, and I've been listening to you for 5 minutes." And she said, I said, "Stop, come on now. It's not, it can't be so. It can't be what you're saying." And so I took a nice long glass of water, and I had a nice little sip, and then I looked at her and I just said very calmly and gently, "The ego wants you dead." And then I continued on with my talk. That was my answer to stop. Well, I think I talked about how it's not outside of you and how the answer is totally within you. The kingdom of heaven is within. And I probably talked for 2 hours about the kingdom of heaven is within you. And then a few weeks later, another course teacher was coming there, and I got an email, and they said, because of the controversial nature of the previous Course in Miracles teacher, we are not going to allow this next Course in Miracles teacher to speak at our church. And I read further, I said, well, I thought, I don't think I was so controversial. I was really happy and joyful there when I shared. They said, our church attendance dropped off by 30 or 50%. And I thought, well, isn't that natural? If people start to take in the idea that the kingdom of heaven is within, wouldn't church attendance go down? I mean, I saw nothing disturbing or controversial in the whole thing. So I had a good laugh. But actually, I'm glad you're bringing this up, because hatred is an ego emotion. And the only way we experience hatred is when we identify our identity with the ego. And then that's when the intense hatred can come up. Isabel was calling it rage, actually, anger and rage. And then the ego will try to project that onto God or onto the world. So I'm glad you're bringing it up, because I think that's a core issue here, and we like to go right at the core. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we can go to David. You can unmute.
Superb. Hi, everybody. Hola.
Hi.
I'm going to try and talk slowly, but I'm a little bit excited to share. So, a couple things I'm moved to share. One was everything kind of came for me as far as what I was learning over the last few days in meditation this morning. So there I was meditating. This is the look of me meditating. I suppose that's what it looks like. And getting lost on, the ego trying to distract me with other trains of thought. Oh, this is what I'm doing this afternoon, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'll disregard that, back to the meditation. But in any case, one of the, all of a sudden I got this image. Usually when I have my eyes closed, I usually see everything like the old black and white television screen, just with darkness and a lot of little bits of light. And then this image of this wave, this breaking wave, came towards me, and I kind of see it as a wave that, if I was swimming, I wouldn't really be able to swim through it. It's something that's going to come on top of me. I'm not a great swimmer, so automatically I felt this fear come up, and then I thought, wait a minute. I don't know what the Spanish word for bullshit is. But wait a minute, I'm feeling this fear from a wave that is basically just particles of light that have just kind of organized themselves into this wave, and then I've attached all this. The ego has attached all this automatic fear to it, and I thought, okay, well, that's the ego's fear I'm feeling, and I thought, I don't know why, it seems so simple, yet to me so profound. This was an example of what the ego does for everything that I experience and everything I attach meaning to. Like I said, they're just particles of light arranged into a form that I identify as a wave, and that I automatically need to have fear about. Yet it obviously is just my mind, a projection outside of myself that for some reason I'm supposed to fear. It's like, oh my God, and then all the lessons of the course about how things don't leave their source, just kind of came back to me, and it was a really enlightening, for lack of a better term, enlightening moment for me. And the other thing I wanted to share was like a few days before the retreat, I was the thought came because in the correspondence was the idea that you could put your questions forth, and thinking about the fact that, okay, well, with all my past experience, I don't know if it makes sense to base a question on my past experience, because I'm just rehashing things I think I know. And there was something. Sorry, I'll talk slower. there was something from the course as well about I can't really know what I want for myself. So I asked Spirit. What should I pray for? What maybe should I, in a sense, what should I want for myself? And I was shown, very clearly, the light that I in some sense represents God, the light of God, and in the middle of it, the shape of a star with very crisply defined edges and just space behind it. So there was like the darkness of the star and then the light of God all around it. And I was thinking, what the expletive, insert expletive here, what does that mean, right? It made no sense to me at all, yet it was a very crisp, clear image, and I knew it was an answer to my prayer. So for the next few days, I was going along with, okay, well, what do I do with that? So I was just using it in meditation. If I'd be out on a walk, I would just try and keep that image in my mind. I didn't know what else to do with it. My ego didn't know what else to do with it. But early into this retreat, I had some dark stuff come up. That with the teaching realized wasn't me. And so then I realized, oh, well, that's what that image was. It was delineating my darkness, delineating my shadow, so to speak, and the star being space. Also saying that it's not me. There's actually nothing there. So in hindsight, I realized it was the answer to my prayer. It was what I would want for myself. But at the same time, if I would have realized that ahead of time, if Jesus would have just given me the words to say, oh, you're going to have to go into your shadow and delineate your shadow. It's like, oh my God, no, I don't want to do that. I've been resisting going back through the courses because, I got so far and then didn't continue. It's like, yeah, no, that seems really tedious and a lot of work. I'm not going to want to do that. But of course, Jesus gave me a really gentle way to do that. So he let me know he was basically, helping me with it, answered my prayer without me knowing my prayer was being answered until the revelation came afterwards. And in that sense, it was an answer to two prayers. My other prayer was kind of like in the background, was for me to see that Jesus was by my side with whatever I was going through, and so. He showed me that obviously he was by my side with everything that I was going through, yet it wouldn't have been in my best interest for me to be aware of that. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Wonderful. Wonderful expression. Jesus reaches us in just the way we can handle it and get the lesson. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, next we can go to Janet. You can unmute there.
Okay. I wanted to.
Hi.
I just got something on my screen that said the host has spotlighted me. So I wanted to say very, very sincerely, I'm so grateful for this experience. But what came to my mind is I was raised Christian Science, and then I moved on to Joel Goldsmith and the Infinite Way. And now, of course, the Course, which I've been studying a long time. And of course, healing the mind is key in all of those different aspects, all of those different religions or practices. And I was interested, though, in the physical, healing the physical as well. So my question would be, what has been your experience with the healing of the physical?
Yeah, I would say the thing that comes to me is that it's a reflection. Everything that seems to be physical is a reflection of mind, which all those teachings teach as well. With the Course, I can see that all the workbook lessons are aimed at showing that everything is mental. In the sense that even Mary Baker Eddy, an amazing healer, said there's no mind in matter. There's no life, truth, substance, or intelligence in matter. And I see that the workbook of A Course in Miracles is like a mind training system to lead the mind into that experience. And I know in working with Jesus for all these years, every time I would mention something that was physical, maybe it was a politician that I didn't like, or maybe it was a whole political party I didn't like, or sometimes it wasn't just a body, it was a society. I would say things to Jesus like, I've had it with society. I can't take society anymore. That Jesus would always tell me the society is in your mind, and that politician is in your mind, and that political party that you don't like, that's in your mind too. And in the Course, Jesus says it's a world of ideas. That's the one thing you must learn first, is that it's a world of ideas. So what seems to be physical is mental. And he does say that at one point. He says all illness is mental illness. So he comes right out and says it very directly with a period at the end of the sentence. Now that actually takes a lot of mind training to come to that, because that's enlightenment. To see, he says, there is one thing you must ultimately learn. There is nothing outside of you. Again, he's talking about the mind. And the whole mind he's talking about. He's not talking about the split mind. He's talking about the whole mind. The right mind, wrong mind metaphor is just an option to see that purpose is the only choice, or right mind is the only choice. And then when you experience that fully and make no exceptions, then there is no wrong mind. You are left being the dreamer of a dream, and the world is not outside of you. The world is in your mind, and ideas leave not their source, which he also emphasizes. So in terms of practical experience, I think in that alignment and in that joining, then it seems to be what, from the world's perspective, could be symptom removal or experientially there's a sense of joy and peace and happiness that is the defining characteristics of God, of this whole mind. And so whenever the question arises around physical healing, I remember that part in the Course where Jesus says, don't ask the Holy Spirit to heal the body. Ask the Holy Spirit to heal your perception of the body, which again, that sentence throws it back on the mind again, which Mary Baker Eddy was doing with all of her teachings as well. Bring everything back to mind, to divine mind, to the mind of Christ. Let that mind be the mind that is the mind you share with Christ, as the Christ. And there was a video that recently came out that Francis and I did a talk on. I think it was Beyond the Body was the name of the weekend retreat, where Francis brought up a section, I believe it was from the workbook, where you were saying the body suffers in order that the mind does not see that it suffers. Very powerful idea. So you can start to see the projection of the guilt onto the body in terms of symptoms or discomfort, pain, so forth, is quite a trick that is something that has to be seen beyond. But that was, we did a whole weekend on that, and I remember that was quite a powerful experience. It's really addressing the question.
Yeah, and also I think just in practical experience, this confusion of perceiving the body and its sickness is the same level of error. Body and sickness are equally, like a error. But the thing is, we have to really learn it, and it's quite profound. To me, I feel like sickness and the healing of the body is, if anything, is a byproduct or effect, but it's not something we can achieve, as a goal, hold as a goal, as a focus. Because for me, I realized that, the body's thoughts or sickness can be quite a preoccupation of the mind for me all throughout my life. And yet, when I got into the Course was directing the mind to really focus on, on the healing of the mind and really go at the root and the cause of it. So I just, one example was when I was in the middle of all that, I had symptoms, body symptoms that, it was probably just always there. And I remember one morning, at one point, I just woke up in half asleep and had a dream where in my dream, I cried out to have the body symptom be healed, which was actually, I wasn't really even praying on it in my daily life, but in my dream, I was very emotional and I was crying out to have the body symptom be taken away. And then this angel showed up in my dream. It was so real to me. And she looked at me, and from her eyes, we telepathically communicate. And she basically just said, I can take it away, but that's not really the true lesson. And she looked at me with this empathy, but just like, but this is not what you want. But I said, that's what I want. And then when I woke up, the body symptom was gone. And it was gone for a week. And then it came back. So, but what that experience gave to me was this, somehow it settled for me to realize, yes, body symptoms can be taken away. And yet that is not the lesson. That is not the focus. And from that point on, I just really shift my purpose and my focus around it. And I was thinking, okay, no matter what seems to be the perception of the body, no matter whether it's healthy or it's sick, no matter what's going on here, let's not that become the distraction of my mind training anymore. So the focus is that let me remember to forgive. Let me see what is the belief and the judgments, and to learn to truly be in the spirit's joy. And in that, somehow the body symptoms are fading, but that's just really feels like a byproduct. And yet the mind, truly the health is inner peace. And that is learned through, you give your mind's power to the real cause, the real problem. So.
Yeah, and there's a video that I have on YouTube where I talk about level confusion. And for somebody who's come through Mary Baker Eddy and Joel Goldsmith, this is a very rich topic because the right mind is the awareness that only mind is causative, and the wrong mind is the belief in external causation. And so level confusion is wrong-mindedness, straight out. It is the belief that there's something external that has causation. Somebody already raised in this retreat the idea of magic, and is it okay to mix a bit of magic and miracle? And in certain times I said when the fear is too great, a mixture of magic and miracle can be helpful at reducing fear. But actually when you get into right-mindedness and transcending level confusion, then that is really where the spiritual awakening occurs. So what this means is, for example, all pain requires wrong-mindedness. Pain is simply a wrong-minded perception. It doesn't really have to do with appearances. Ken and I always talk about Ramana Maharshi, and at the end of Ramana Maharshi's life, he seemed to have a tumor. His body got very thin, and there's some beautiful photos of his last days where you see this very thin body and very thin face and these glowing eyes. It looks like the light is streaming out of them, even though the body looks like it's going through a death process from the ego's perception. And of course, Jesus, on the cross seemed to be a bloody mess, but that had nothing to do with the state of mind, the right-mindedness of being aligned with the source. I and the Father are one. Pain is an example of wrong-mindedness, and pleasure is an example of wrong-mindedness. Pain and pleasure are the same error, both of them reinforcing the body as real in awareness by projecting causation out. And that's why pleasure is such a distraction for waking up, where the idea that it's like you have to believe in externals to even experience pleasure. So there's a section in the Manual for Teachers where the title of it is a question for Jesus: what is the real meaning of sacrifice? And Jesus comes out in that section and says, God's teachers can have no regrets on giving up the pleasures of the world. Now we're moving a little closer to mysticism, beyond the mainstream views of spirituality. We're actually getting down to the heart of the matter. Because pleasure is definitely a wrong-minded perception as well as pain. And when you get into the miracle working function, which is our function, that's our forgiveness is our function, that inspires joy. Because by receiving in consciousness the miracle impulses and acting directly on those miracle impulses, which is just the body as a communication device, then the body is used as like a puppet, an oracle, to share the kindness, the happiness, the laughter, the joy. And that's what Jesus is a good example of. For those, most of those, or we'll say the latter part of those 30 some odd years, that was an example of right-mindedness, where he was just reflecting the inspiration of the Spirit. What was he doing? He just simply heard one voice. He did not respond to a split mind anymore. He heard only the voice of the Holy Spirit. As I've said, the Holy Spirit is the spirit of joy. And it is possible, even in this world, to hear that voice and no other. There it is. That's atonement. Hearing one voice and following that one voice is what leads to the experience of joy. So it's great that you have followed the pathways that you have, the different aspects of this beautiful non-dual teaching, from Barry Baker-Eddy to Joel Goldsmith, and now with the Course. And basically, there is a video that I've done on level confusion, and I've done a number of writings on that as well. But that would be something that probably you would receive a lot of benefit from, just searching my name and typing in level confusion after that on Google or on YouTube. And I think that would be something that would be very nurturing for your soul, for your heart. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It was a blessing to us all.
Okay, thank you. Well, next we can go to Shadi. You can unmute.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
My first time here. This is so much fun. I'm having so much fun. Okay, I saw a few people in front of me, and I didn't realize it's going to be me. This is going to be a loaded question. I am trying to stay a little bit slower, so maybe, hopefully, I don't get in trouble to the translators. First, the relationship panel. I couldn't understand why everyone in this wonderful relationships, people who are on the Course, having relationships but are having so much turmoil around sex and enjoying each other and physical intimacy. And I was wondering if I'm not getting something right. Not that I'm having sex, I'm not, but I'm not in a loving relationship with somebody on the Course. But I always thought that, yes, when I am, I should, because this is just something we do. I don't know if the things we do in this world is going to affect my spiritual mind. Whether I am teaching, I teach piano, I teach kindness, I have a nonprofit. Whether I'm doing my nonprofit work, it's still ego-based giving, right? Francis, you were talking about giving. If it's action-based, it's ego-based, right? So anything that we do in this world, that half of our day, if I'm teaching and I'm doing my nonprofit or I'm having sex, these are all ego-based, but that doesn't mean that it's taking away from my reality with the world or my mind. My mind and the progress of my spiritual mind, it still has its own life. Yes, it's dualism, because I'm halfway here and halfway doing, I'm a human being practicing spiritual progress until I get to that oneness. Yes. So part of my question is, am I getting this wrong, first of all? Because are we supposed to be just kind of refraining from any kind of a physical pleasure or doing anything in this world? Are we supposed to completely drop all of it? The balance is
That's a great. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
question.
It is.
I think that is a very natural question when we talk about letting go, but truly the thing is we're letting go of is the control of the form. So what we're letting go is our plan and our agenda and the purpose that we give to everything as the ego says the purpose is. So we're letting it all be taken by the Spirit. And actually the Spirit, it's like David always uses 52 card, a deck. metaphor, he always says 52 cards, it's all yours and you can shuffle it. So that is how it actually feels like, all the symbols and the task and job and everything all given over to the spirit to reshuffle, and he choose and pick. So actually, in terms of form, we are still quite involved in terms of action and in terms of relationships. Yeah, I've been, very, very involved in tasks, projects. So I can't really say just because I'm doing this, it is the ego, because in my mind, this thing was given to the spirit and was chosen by the spirit. So really it's not ego sponsored action or purpose anymore. So the purpose is not in the form itself and in the action, but is in the mind. So this is really the shift. Like we hold the spirit as our goal, and let spirit pick the people and pick the tasks. So
yeah, I'm glad you're raising this question, because it's a very basic question, where there can be some teachings that would teach that anything that involves form involves ego, because the ego made the form, so it's that way. But actually, in the workbook of A Course in Miracles, Jesus comes right out and says, it is possible to listen to the voice for God all through the day without interrupting your regular activities in any way. Whoa, is that literal? Jesus is like, yeah. And the other thing is people equate ego identification with having a body. But Jesus' life itself is the best example that that's a false correlation. Now, for the first 30, 32, 33 years of his life, yes, Jesus was, the mind was associated with the ego, as everyone who comes to this world. Jesus wasn't born egoless in the manger. Jesus wasn't actually born without parents who had sex. Jesus came to the world the way all babies come to this world. It wasn't an immaculate conception. That's a nice little add-on, kind of, if you're going to build a religion, my avatar had an immaculate conception. Take that. It's like, wow, okay. But that's not even the case. But let's say there came a point before John baptized Jesus in the story, 2,000 years ago, where Jesus went to the River Jordan, and then John was quite surprised. He was just out there baptizing people in the river, saying repent, and doing his John thing, and then Jesus appears, and then suddenly John knew that this was not a typical baptism, that he was coming upon the Messiah. Suddenly in the river, the Messiah shows up, and he's like a few feet away. And John, immediately the Spirit comes through John, says, this is the one. He started saying, he baptized Jesus, the voice from the dove came down and landed on Jesus' head, and the voice from the heavens said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. And that's right there is an example of, it seems like a man, but it's an egoless I am presence. Because what starts coming out of that man's mouth is no longer human. I and the Father are one is not a human statement. Before Abraham was, I am. That is not human. That is the Holy Spirit. That is the divine Holy Spirit right there. And it may look like a man through the ego's filter, but that's not anymore. That's the living Christ coming, using the puppet. And so right there at that moment, that shows us that having a body doesn't necessarily imply having an ego, because that presence is using the puppet, but it's not in the puppet. It's never was inside the puppet, and now we're sure it's not, because it doesn't even matter what happens to the puppet. Even the puppet being crucified at the end didn't Didn't change the I am presence at all. Now for yourself, you teach piano, you have students, you have interactions. Those are mirrors to the mind, and those are opportunities. Everything is an opportunity. So when I dove into this and accepted my calling back, when I was in my early 30s is when I really said a full yes to, okay, take everything. I'll be used for you. If I had thought that everything I'm going to do on the planet is just going to be of the ego, I would be like, what's the incentive? Why get out of bed in the morning? Why teach piano? Why meet anybody for lunch or dinner? Why travel? Why do anything? And so Jesus was saying, yeah, let the puppet be under my control. Jesus was saying, I will use it to smile through it, to hug through it, to laugh through it, to speak through it. All part of a purification process in the mind, purification of consciousness. And that's a very good question you're raising, because I can see where people would say, why do the Course, or why pray? Why have guidance if it's all ego anyway? Then it starts to head over to this idea, well, if I'm a spiritual being, then I can do anything that I want, because my spiritual beingness is unaffected by whatever I do. And the only problem with that is what you do comes from what you think. And as you let your thoughts be purified, you start to realize you have an involuntary life. That's the name of a book, isn't it? Involuntary Life. Was that Brother Lawrence or one of those books? Where you start to realize that you are given over to joy, to happiness, to spirit. And then what you do just comes from what you think. And you're going through a purification of releasing all grievances and attack thoughts. So I'm just so glad that you raised this, because when we had our Holy Relationship panel, and of course there were so many things on the chat room, we need to do this every week, we need more of this and everything. I'm sure some people were inspired to hear the Holy Relationship panel talking about their sexual thoughts, and then Greg bringing in masturbation and all these topics, and Eric, over to you, Pete. That's like, it was a comedy show. But actually, some people were relieved to see that, like, oh my gosh, I am not used to hearing this on a Course in Miracles panel. they don't talk in this way. But I like your take on it too, where you're like saying, well, is there really that much struggle and intensity going on? That's a good, valid question. And we need to have that. That's a part of the whole process of someone saying, isn't it supposed to be enjoyable? There's supposed to be an enjoyable flow, and you're raising that up, and so we need you on our Holy Spirit panel. That'll speed up the whole thing for everybody. It's beautiful, actually. It's a very welcomed input. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Shadi. Okay, next we can go to Brendan. You can unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Brendan.
Hi. First of all, I just want to thank you all because on the first night, first night, I brought up that I felt an emptiness in my heart, and that's lifted now since I've been going through this weekend. And I also I have a question. It's kind of, I'm not really sure how to say it, but the question I sent in, Francis touched on it a bit on Friday night, And I'm just struggling. I'm having a desire to ask this question. I've been studying the course for about 8 years now, and I've been trying to hear Jesus and the Holy Spirit and get guidance. I'm not really even sure what guidance looks like, or what it is, or if I'm doing something wrong, or if I'm supposed to hear, like, how am I supposed to hear the Spirit? And I don't know. I have mental illness, and I've been struggling over all these years, like having like the ego come in and tell me that like it would act as if it is Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and I'd listen to it, and it would just cause me like to run on a wild goose chase. And I don't know. I guess my question is just is like, what does guidance look like, and like in your experience, how did you come across hearing the Spirit? And like, did it come right away? Did it come over time? Did you need to go through healing first? Like, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenton. That's beautiful. Yeah, I remember we were talking before this session, and we were recalling your question about really discernment, a very sincere question of discernment between Jesus and the ego, or the spirit and the ego, and how the ego it's quite clever and ingenious, and will try to talk spiritually even, and it doesn't have a pure motive at all. It's a death wish. So it can disguise itself in all kinds of ways. But actually it reminds me of this part in this movie Solaris that I showed recently, where this psychologist goes off to this space station near this planet called Solaris that's emanating all this light. And he talks to one of the people upon arrival, and the man there at the space station, his man's name is Snow, and he basically says, "What is going on here? What is happening here?" And Snow says, "I could tell you what's happening, but that wouldn't really tell you what's happening. You have to discover it. You have to see it for yourself." So your question is asking for an experience. Even though I've given many talks, and Francis and I have talked around the world on this is probably one of the most important topics that anyone could raise. You're raising one of the most important topics of discernment in the mind. But it's not until we actually take some steps based on what really is strong in our heart that we're put into seeming situations where we may even have a lot of people around us that are all asking that same question. I know in my early years of A Course in Miracles, I thought, this is a comedy, because when I would talk to a lot of Course in Miracles students, they started saying, well, your Holy Spirit is telling you this. My Holy Spirit is telling me this. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. This is a comedy. And I would say, how many Holy Spirits are there? They would say, well, 6 billion. Now there's 7 billion. The planet has got more people. And I would say, wow, that sounds like a mess. 6 billion different individualized Holy Spirits. And they would say, well, yeah, it's a spark of light in every person. And I said, do these Holy Spirits ever disagree? And they would say, yes. And mine is different than yours, and telling me something very different. And I thought, well, I don't know. I have to feel the joy in my heart, and I have to get in touch. This is an important question for me. And I know for Francis, that's what you were sharing earlier, that guidance is really about an experience for you. Discernment is about an experience. It's not something where you can just go tune into this lecture, write down, take your notes, and then you've got a formula that you've come up with you were saying on Friday night, it's not a formula. It's actual an experience that you had to give yourself over to have it.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Brandon, for me, it's definitely a learned connection. I never really know that I could just ask for guidance to guide my life. It was so new for me that when I first joined the community, I was so suspicious of this particular piece of advice that you can actually ask for guidance, and something in me just did not believe I could hear it or there was anything like it. So it took quite a few years, I would say, for me to turn from suspicious to not too vicious, but to full experience of it. And a lot of, but I think for now, I would just say that the guidance is not necessarily for the future. Like, it's not a formula or blanket statement. From now on, this is what you're going to be like. You're going to be applying to everything. It's more in the moment, because it is more a relationship that the guidance is pointing to, is to an actual experience that you can rely on me now. So I think for me, it was actually experience of constantly asking and then being uplifted in that very moment, then build a confidence to keep doing the same and then receive the miracles. And in that miracle that I receive in different forms, but the same quality, then I started to learn and know spirit. So that's, yeah.
Yeah. And I feel your sincerity. I mean, I think you're sincerely wanting to be shown. Is when I see your face and I hear your question, I really feel the sincerity. It's like you're saying to Spirit, to Jesus, show me. I want an actual experience of the difference. I don't want to be fooled by these ego tricks. And it was, as I said earlier, this is response to David's question earlier. I feel like that was part of our guidance with starting even the co-living. Imagine, for example, like La Casa, you come and you are living with 25 other people. Well, whenever you put 25 people on one property, that's kind of fun for me. I have lived in spiritual communities for many, many years, but that's kind of a fun situation. And a dog, Benito, and a cat, Zion. And I think Zion has some girlfriends too that come there. I'm not even sure what goes on at the party house. But it's wonderful because when you bring 25, 26 people together to live together, there is going to be some discernment lessons, because you might have people saying, well, Jesus told me this and Jesus told me that, and maybe even they say Jesus told you. What you're telling me Jesus is telling me this? You see how you do get into discernment a little. It's a fast track. And the same with our co-living up in at the monastery, or when we've headed there in the summer, or at Camas, or over in Spain, in Mallorca. It's really the willingness when people come, they're asking the same question you're asking. They want to be guided. They want to be inspired. They want to have clarity. They want to move through time and space with guidance, not like a feeling of hit or miss, which many human beings tell me that they feel like it's a hit or miss thing, like it's not consistent. They don't have a consistent connection there. But that is the prayer. And I think that's the prayer under co-living. And even if you talk to everyone at this house where we are right now at Quantico, they could tell you a lot of what they experience is just a prayer in their heart for clarity, a prayer in their heart for peace, a prayer for harmony, a prayer for, may I follow the guidance of the Spirit, and may I experience who I really am. Show me who I really am. Let this day be an opportunity to show me who I really am. So thank you, Brandon, for bringing that up, because I really feel your heart with that, and I really feel that's what you're really saying is show me that connection. I want to feel like you felt with this weekend. The emptiness disappeared, and you could feel the connection. And I'm so happy because I'm happy that this weekend could be an answer in a very experiential way to your prayer. And I know that you want the rest of your life to be the same way as this weekend. You want to feel that connection. And I thank you for bringing this up. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we can go to David Cutting. You can unmute.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, David.
Hi. Thank you for having this weekend and for having me on here. Gosh, there's so much. It's this so enlightening, and I just wanted to actually get off a little bit and just share something about with communing with spirit. It's something I got into before I ever did Course in Miracles, and it was through the Conversation with God books with Neil Donald Walsh. Reading those kind of inspired that idea. What do you mean I can have a relation? I can hear something other than just my own thoughts. And we were up in the Green Mountains one day, and it just happened. I had fallen the first day we got there and broke my arm on this trip. And so I was spending a lot of time in the room and writing and just staring at the mountains. And that's when it all started happening. And then eventually Spirit told me one day, and I was really unhappy and and unsettled. And I was basically, given like the guidance, the advice to just stop thinking. And I said, for how long? And Spirit said, forever. I said, wow. Is that possible? Well, what do you do besides thinking? And then I said, well, I guess you could pray instead of think and do all these things, and I went down. And then my wife had heard about ACIM, and so we got into ACIM from there. And we've been studying the course for many, many years. We're only about halfway through it because we'll take like one lesson and spend weeks with it. And I don't know, but and we do both listen, and it is a fun experience that my wife and I are very different and think very different, have very different worldly answers for absolutely everything. We're just the epitome of opposites attract, and and we complete each other. When we're work together, but we will get the same answers from Spirit all the time. And but I do I love what we're learning here, and I'm like, gosh, we have this thing, and yet I'm always running around in circles with my ego for hours before I even think to ask or remember to ask. And then it's so much of the time it's asking about my worldly problems. And, and I'd really, am trying to move into this being guided now, being shifted, hearing what Spirit, I don't care what I'm thinking or what the answer to my, stupid thought is or question and that sort of thing. And so I love that this whole thing ever since Friday night, especially looking for our joy, our happiness is now. It's not in our future. It's not what we do next. So on that note, I'm still confused about, sometimes I feel like a pulling, kind of a desire, but I don't know if it's even that. So it's like a pulling, like, oh, I want to live somewhere else. But I don't know if that's ego or spirit. And then then I stop, and then am I afraid to move? Is that ego? Is my desire to move because I think it'll be better if I move? Is that ego? Is it all ego? And I'm just, and I'm, and there's a little story to this because 15 years ago, my wife and I bought a home together after, we've always had we were in New York. We grew up in New York City, and I was in art there, animation and stuff like that. But then, the housing market exploded just when we were ready to buy something and it got priced out. Then we were going to rent something in New York, and 9/11 happened, and the building we were actually going to rent in got destroyed. So I started freelance, moved to Jersey because it was cheaper there. And then in the 2 years we lived there, everything doubled. And so we ended up trying to find something. We ended up in Williamsburg, Virginia. It's really pretty, really safe. Couldn't find anything. Last year we're leaving. We're literally on the way home, never going to come back here again. My wife goes, "What's that neighborhood?" And our agent took us in, and we looked at this place, and I didn't like it, and she didn't like it, but we both felt bad and thought the other person liked it. So we both said, okay. And out of love for each other, we both bought a place we didn't want, thinking the other person wanted it, and we felt so bad to say no. And we've been here for 15 years. And every time we try to leave, we get pulled back in. I mean, we literally moved and took all our stuff with us and moved to Tennessee to live with my dad and my estranged dad, who I never really knew. Total disaster. We spent a summer there. That's when the market crashed, and all the jobs, because there's animation out there, but all the studios ended up laying off people. We couldn't find work. We had a neighbor who we somehow stayed in touch with, who wasn't really like this, but we would pray, and every time we'd pray, she's like, "Oh, come live with me." And we had put our home on the market, and it never sold, and it never rented, and it was price, no one. It was so weird. We ended up squatting back in our home. Spirit. We would pray. I mean, we literally prayed. One day, my wife's like, "Can't God just give us $50,000 so we can?" And on the last day we could live here, we received $50,000 to stay in our home from HUD. We got this award, but we had to stay in our home for 7 years to do it. So it's every time we pray, we end up back in this home and in this place that we just feel unhappy in. And it's so confusing. And, we just kind of give up and just, and we, we get answers to so many things. We have so many joys in our lives, but yet there's always this emptiness about where we live and just feeling like we're not where we're supposed to be. And when I ask Spirit, I get answers. I don't really, I get basically what to do next, what to do right now, but no answer to the big picture. And so I'm kind of okay, I get that. And I even asked again last night, and I'm like, okay, what is this? Is this desire to leave? Is this ego or spirit? And my answer was, in a way, it's both, because ego is anything in the future is ego-based, and ego's using this to kind of distract, I'm kind of caught up in this whole future thing, where I know that spirit would guide me presently on all the steps I would need to do to get me wherever it is, to joy, happiness thing. But yet I feel at the same time, but I'm doing nothing about what's making me unhappy in some weird way. I'm in this really weird loop, this conflicted loop. And I'm like, maybe David could ask, but don't tell him it's for me, because
Well, we have the same name, so that's good. We can,
yes.
It's funny, Helen Schuckman was the scribe of the Course, and her husband wasn't into the Course at all and everything, and his name was Louis. But when she would pray to Jesus, she would call him Jonathan, because she didn't want Jesus to know that it was actually Louis. So this is the scribe of the Course, would say, well, Jonathan this and Jonathan that. And sometimes we start to feel like the guidance has been so varied and everything that maybe we want to use another name. Oh, here's Fred. There's a question from Fred, Jesus. But actually, when you're talking, it's so beautiful, because I feel the prayer, I feel your heart. You and your wife have such a heart underneath, and God's Son is no traveler in time and space, and when we try to evaluate the guidance based on time and space, we can't receive the experience because our mind isn't a traveler in time and space. And I love your willingness, because that is the spiritual journey. If you listen to all of us tell our journeys, we would tell you of many moves, of many countries, of many places. We were just sitting today and we were saying, well, there's 27 different countries represented on this online gathering. And I thought, well, and then in this house alone, Swava was saying there's 8 people that live in this house, and they're all from different countries, in the same house, just in this house alone. And I know for myself, from like 34 years ago, when the Course came into my experience, there's been lots of travels within the United States and Canada, and then to 44 different countries. When I took a flight on December 31st of 2019, I took a flight down here to Mexico. I had not been in the same country for that long of a period of time, and I've got for 34 years go here, go there, go. I was a go-go guy for 34 years, and now this year, 2020, or the past year, stay. This is the go-go guy. Stay. You just have to be so willing. I will step back and let him lead the way. And I know that's been, for Francis, the same experience. There was a lot of travels and leaps and movements that you've experienced in your whole parable. But also that has sharpened your desire, I think, for the present moment. That's what's come of all of that.
Yeah. And recently we were just talking, because one morning I just woke up, I had this very, I entered into the perceptual world, because I saw how this one tiny idea threw the whole world up when I wake up. It was like that. So it's not the body wakes up to the world, but the world shows up. And then I was talking to JP after I got up in the morning. He just said, I have the exact same dream or the experience. And then we were comparing notes, and he said this sentence. He said what he clearly saw was that location is a function of the mind. So we're not in a location. We're not stuck in a location, but really it is in our mind. So that's the way, the world is so fluid in reflecting our mind, in reflecting the desire. So we are constantly just pulling up what is, what can be used by the spirit for the current mind training in this very moment. And I think it's for us just to see the world as nothing but that. They can't limit us. They can't be anything except there's a perfect reflection right now for us to use it for the mind training. So, yeah.
And I love everything you've shared, that even that experience in the mountains and then with conversations with God and being introduced to, I can tune into something beyond my everyday thoughts and follow that, to the idea that you and your wife are opposites, but you complement each other. You both are on this journey together. You both are sharing your thoughts, sharing your experiences. That's ideal. This is the way that the awakening occurs. You're giving yourself over to it even with a partner that seems to be an opposite. You know, you're looking for the sameness. You're looking for the experience of the connection. And that's one of our themes for this week. Make this year different by making it all the same. It takes dedication. It takes devotion to hang in there when there seems to be so many different images that we are facing every day. And yet Frances was sharing, she could see, and JP could see when they woke up in the morning, that the world was a projection of the mind, and it wasn't... I'm not sure I understand. Even my watch is having trouble with this one. You can't handle the truth. It's a projection of mind, and that we're home in the heart of God. And we may have kind of a fun adventure while we seem to be dreaming of exile. Even a watch that's talking to you is saying it doesn't understand. It's hard. It's not something that a watch could understand. But we feel the love, you know, we feel your joy and your devotion. So thank you for bringing this up and sharing a bit of your journey, because you're showing that you really have the faith to hang in there and to really stay with it, even in the face of what the world would say contradictory things. But there are no conflicting outcomes. When your goal is peace, you cease to perceive conflicting outcomes in the world. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Well, looks like we've reached our hour here.
Yeah.
What a beautiful weekend, and what a beautiful week this was. A whole celebration of illumination.
Wow.
It just went on, and so many miracles. So many miracles.
Yeah.
And we're very open. We appreciate all your questions, your prayers, your feedback. We'll take all that in with us into our prayers as we go forward moment by moment, and really focused on staying in the moment, staying in the joy, but watch whatever comes our way with an open mind.
Yeah. And thank you for just being so open with us all and sharing your heart. And thank you for choosing to spend time with us. Like David said, you know, this wouldn't even be in your perception unless you choose to see this very thing. So this is a function of the mind. This is reflecting our desire to be together and enter the great awakening together. So I feel just very honored to be part of it with you all. And we're just going to continue on in every single moment together.
Thank you. Many blessings.